Well, hello and welcome to today's webinar as part of the KaiNexus Continuous Improvement webinar series. I am Mark Graben, a senior advisor with KaiNexus, and I'm happy to play the role of host and moderator today for a presentation titled Building a Learning Organization, Leadership Practices and Human Skills that Promote Learning. And it's going to be presented today by Sabrina Malter, who is joining us from Germany. And I'll tell you more about Sabrina and her background in a minute. So I'm very excited that we have Sabrina here to share with us today. Let me introduce and tell you a little bit more about our presenter today, Sabrina Malter. Sabrina is passionate about creating a work environment where everyone can bring their full self to work and to make the boldest impact for the organization and beyond. She loves to challenge, encourage, and support organizations that embark on their learning and growth journeys. So Sabrina brings her passion to life as a leadership and learning coach and consultant at her own business, Unveil Business Consulting. She understands the power of lean thinking and working toward her vision with a special expertise and skill in things including kata coaching, leadership development, and cultural change. Sabrina's 25 years of industry background brought her experience and expertise in business transformation, organizational development, and strategy management. Her education includes an MSc degree in sustainability management from the Open University, UK, as well as further study on leading people-centered change, leadership coaching, and professional resilience. So Sabrina lives with her husband and two daughters in the south of Germany. And so with that, welcome. Thank you for being here, Sabrina. Let me turn it over to you.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm so excited and happy to be with you and with all the participants today, and to talk about this topic, building a learning organization, which is very, very dear to my heart and I'm very passionate about. Yes, and so let's start. I'm quite happy to, during the session, I have some questions for you, for the audience, and also to answer your questions later. In this talk, we will cover first, why we have to build a learning organization deliberately. Why doesn't it come just from itself? Because each child loves to learn, and it's not that every adult person, forgets this or loses this. Why do we have to create it deliberately in organizations? And second, what leadership practices and what human skills promote organizational learning? What can we do with leadership practices, with human skill building to move towards this learning organization? So the challenge when I'm with customers and leading a strategy or facilitating strategy meetings or strategy development sessions, and we are talking about the vision or on the challenge, what do they want to achieve? As you might expect, most of the time they want to increase performance in some area. And when we look a little bit deeper and ask a little bit deeper what's behind this, then we come most of the times, or every time in my experience, we come to this challenge. We have to unveil the potential of our people and with that of our organization, so that we can move to another level of performance. And what's needed in our world, it's with interdependencies, with complexity and uncertainty, in an organization to move towards unveiling the potential of the people, that's not coming naturally. And why? Why is this way? I brought you this cartoon just for illustration with this, let's say it's a board meeting and the CEO is just presenting his new program or a merger that he's planning. He's very confident and looking forward to this, and convinced that's a good idea. And so he requests to the round, all in favor, say aye. And what he gets is exactly that. What he can hear is exactly that. What he can't hear, you can read in the bubbles, no, 1,000 times no, heaven forbid. And perhaps it's a little bit extreme, but everyone is holding back their concerns. They are not voicing it. And why are they not voicing their concern? They're perhaps, that's the decision. There's a would be a benefit for the business, but that's vague and in the future. And on the other hand, if I don't say anything, I have perhaps a personal benefit for me that the impression of everyone else of myself doesn't get negative in a way. Perhaps they have are holding back because they are thinking, oh, if I say something, my boss won't like it. He really won't like it. I know him. I know how he perhaps reacted in the past if someone says something negative about his baby project or whatever. And so they are holding back. And I brought you with intention this illustration with these 6 guys who are all looking very much similar. It's not a diversity topic. It's not that you have to be the only one in the room to hold back. This impression management that's so common, and we learn it as in childhood, in school, and when we're coming out of school, we are quite good at it, and it works. It works to help us manage the impression of others. But yes, to a price. And what this round should really do, what's that job, is to work on the concerns, to work if someone sees a risk, if they should work on risk mitigation. That's their job, but they don't. And so the cost is that they don't do their job and that they miss opportunities to improve this idea. Even if it's not crushing the business totally, it could certainly have been improved if they would work on the concerns that pop up in their heads. So Amy Edmondson did some amazing research on this topic, on impression management, and also on the topic of psychological safety. Psychological safety, that's the term, stands for an environment where you feel certainly able to voice your concerns, but also expected, even more than just able, expected to voice your concern. It's a major contribution, as well as sharing your mistakes or near mistakes, so that everyone can learn, that the whole organization can learn from your concerns, can work with them, can learn from your mistakes or near mistakes. You share your half-baked ideas, and you don't wait until you think they're perfect now and develop it on your own. You share it, and so the organization has a huge benefit. It's much faster, and everyone learns from this, doing it together, developing ideas further, learning from mistakes or near mistakes. And so in this, what you see here in this graph from Amy Edmondson is what I really would like to look at is this high performance with high performance standards, because low performance standards, it's perhaps not so common, and it's not interesting, I think, for us to be in the apathy zone, or even in a comfort zone where I know I can share everything, but it's nothing that really helps us to grow. But if you have high performance standards, like in most organizations, and we have low psychological safety, like in the cartoon, Amy Edmondson speaks of the anxiety zone. People are afraid to voice their concerns, and they just don't do it. Impression management leads to the silence winning over voice. And if you have, on the other hand, a perfectly psychologically safe environment, you're in the learning zone, which is definitely the high performance zone. And therefore it's clear where we would like to be. Not only that it's much more comfortable for everyone, but also it's leading to higher performance. And the anxiety zone is really it's a place where things can go really wrong, because people just in the cartoon voice what they think someone else, the leader, would like to hear, but they don't voice reality. And you couldn't work on as a team, as a leadership team, as an organization on the things that are perhaps going wrong or on the risks. So we want to be in the learning zone. And what's our actual condition? And now I've brought you this bar 0 to 10. 0 would be this toxic, unsafe environment where we absolutely don't raise even critical concerns, where we engage in backstabbing, we focus on our energy on self-protection. Or in the middle, it's an acceptable level, as long as the need for adaptability is low. Or we would be on a really high level, and that's on a 10 here, what's really needed for a disruptive environment. We would collaborate effectively across silos and expertise. We would consistently speak up with ideas, with questions, concerns, would share our mistakes. We would engage in conflict without fear and reprisal. And we, as an organization, would adapt to change effectively. That would be the perfect world in this category. And now I would like you to type into the chat just spontaneously, what do you think, where is your team or your organization currently on this continuum between 0 to 10? What's your number?
I see a couple of numbers coming through here. Okay, wow, there's a flurry of numbers. 7, 3, 7.5, 3, 6, 7.5, 5, 5, 3, 8, 6, 6, 8, 5, 5, 6, 7, 5, 4, 4, 2.5. Someone else says their team is a 10, the organization is a 6. More broadly, 4, 6.5, 7, 8, 6, 9. Mine has decreased over time. It's now a 5. That's an interesting observation. Yeah. So nobody said 10 for the whole organization. I think we only had 1 9.
Yes, and also 8 is, I would say, it's really great. And congratulations. It's, I'm quite sure you won't change your current workplace. But what I've also heard is that most of, and that's really what I learned in my experience, that most of all the answers are really here in this middle. We don't have a glaring psychological safety problem, so that everyone just talks about toxic environment all the time, but we engage in impression management mostly all of the time, and we get little payoff from HL initiative. That's kind of an indicator where you really can see it, because you're not sharing what I just said before. You're not sharing your ideas, you're not working together on half-baked ideas. You're just doing that perhaps on your own, or decide not to do it at all because on your own you don't have the time. I also heard this 3s. That's really, that would be really a bigger issue. But yeah, I would say most of the people mentioned around 5, and that's also what I learned from my experience in different.
I'm sorry to jump in just once more. There was a comment I think you would find interesting. The CEO would say 10. Most employees would say 3.
Yeah, that would totally fit to our cartoon. I'm quite sure that this CEO in this cartoon would also be perfectly convinced it's a 10. Yeah. That's also perhaps an indicator if a CEO says a 10.
Yeah.
So let's look how we could change that. Leadership practices to promote organizational learning. So when I just go on now to this second and third part, it's really an overview. We could talk about each of these points for 2 hours or more. Yes, but it's an overview, but that doesn't mean that you can't learn something valuable and that you can't learn something that you can put into action immediately. So just before I go on, I would like to invite you really, when you hear something what sounds, that's perhaps quite obvious, yes, but something that sounds quite obvious doesn't mean that we already are able to do that, because many things, like for example later effective listening, are easy to explain and easy to understand, but hard to implement, hard to do each day. And so it's really these things which are quite obvious. You don't need much theory, but you need much deliberate practice and learning and development cycles, to get something out there. So please look out for what sounds perhaps obvious, but it's not the case in your organization. So my first leadership practice is really frame learning as the most critical, or at least one of the most critical contributions, and invite all brains. So to do that, you have to encourage sharing half-baked ideas, concerns, and mistakes, and even dissent if you want really to think deeply about a topic. You have to encourage failing fast and course correcting, so you can hope to get innovation from that. And you have to encourage following the procedures, the current best practice, as well as consciously deviations based on professional judgment, and then sharing this so that you move to excellence. To also help people who are very convinced of their high level of expertise, not just to do something that's not following the procedure, but also to share it so that you all could learn. The second, and yes, it's not a hierarchy, it's not that it's less important, perhaps it's more, is really to build trust. To build trust with appreciative responses to contribution. And that's perhaps one point which sounds so obvious, but it's so hard. If you are thinking of yourself, you're so excited about a project, for example, and share it with your team, and you get critical contributions, you might be, if you are not really perfect, as I am, I'm not really perfect. You might be, and you might, you might not like it, and people might read that on your face, even if you don't say anything critical. So that's really a hard one, really to be really appreciative of critical responses, and that needs to be your attitude. If you only say yes, thank you, but everyone can read your face because it's just a learned, phrase, then it wouldn't work. You have to, you can build trust with regular check-ins and going to the Gemba. You all know that, going to the place where the work is done, showing respect and genuine interest in people and their work experience. Not just going there and looking for the process and how to improve it, that's important, but at the same time, showing really respect and this genuine interest in the people. You can build trust by modeling and demanding inclusive behavior. Just as I said in the beginning, it's not a topic of inclusivity or exclusivity. That's perhaps only the half truth. If you do all the other points, but it's an exclusive behavior where perhaps people are bullied because of race, sexuality, whatsoever, you won't get their voices because they're all the time there. And half their brain power, I would suggest, if I think of myself, is on asking themselves why people are behaving that way. So you also have to modeling and demanding inclusive behavior, also because it's just the right thing to do. And by leading with kindness, because kindness is really powerful when you have to build trust. It doesn't mean low performance standards, don't get me wrong. You can have high performance standards and encourage to get there with kindness. But it's just, as my friend, lean practitioner and coach and consultant, Karen Ross, put it into words, it's just the antidote to fear. And if you want to have a psychological safe environment, you have to find an antidote to fear. And one thing is the expectation that you voice. Expectation, what I just said as a first point, expectation that learning is expected, and that's that you have to, that it's expected that you contribute in this way to the learning of the organization, and it's really an important contribution to performance. But the other half is really to act and lead with kindness. Not dependent on your role of if you are a formal leader or not, so for everyone. And the third leadership practice that I brought is to accelerate learning. is to establish platforms for sharing mistakes, problems, learnings, to use coaching questions to promote learning in one-on-ones or within every kind of meetings, and to deliberately ask for problems, for mistakes and learnings during, for example, operation reviews or project reviews during your regular meetings. In this context, I really like this quote from Fujio Cho, the former chairman of Toyota, to frame the work problem solving as a team sport. And he said in a meeting where someone just presented how well his team performs and did a little bit explaining how fine everything is and what a great team he leads and what a good manager he is. And he responded, "We all know you are a good manager, and otherwise we would not have hired you. But please talk to us about our problems so we can work on them together." And again, like in this cartoon, it's really the job of this really expensive senior management meetings. When you think of all the people that are sitting there, spend their time not to hear that everyone is perfect, but really to work together on problems, on concerns, and so on. So I really like this quote. And I also like a quote of Isao Yoshino, a former Toyota leader, who also led a major leadership development program. And he says, "The only secret to Toyota is its attitude towards learning." And that's really, not only learning like you could perhaps understand it in one dimension, it's really multi-dimension sense of learning. It's not only creating, for example, meetings to share problems and learn, as I just said. It's really also to, as an important leadership practice, that you develop your people while you are developing yourself. So everyone is learning in this, according to this idea. And that leads us to human skills to promote organizational learnings. Because in the end, everyone in the organization has to learn and to develop the leaders and all the people in the organization. And the first one, it's really, as I just mentioned earlier, it's really very easy to grasp and very hard to master. It's listening, and it's so important. It's perhaps the most important skill to master, to listen with your whole being. That's not only that you are not kind of typing something in your phone while there's a presentation, and even this obvious thing we perhaps see often enough, I have seen often enough. It's really also being present in the moment. And if there's a thought coming, just let it go and come back and listen. And so you need much intention to do so. Not thinking what you would like to answer next, not thinking of a brilliant idea, not thinking of the next meeting. And that's really a hard one. And so I would really encourage to work on that with setting your intention in the morning, perhaps, or starting the week, setting your intention, planning some concrete steps that you would like to do, like perhaps, always coming back if you recognize that you're wandering away or thinking of your answer, and then in the evening or end of the week, reflecting and adjusting what you could do as a next step. And by seeing or totally seeing and acknowledging people, when you really hear with all your senses, you show respect for the common humanity of everyone. And so you would, with this behavior, you will also invite people to share their ideas, because they know that they will be listened and they feel that it's important what they have to say. So I brought you just because I like it so much, quote from African Zulu. It's an African Zulu greeting, Sabubona, and it means I see you, and by seeing you, I bring you into being. And that sounds very poetic, but it's really what people experience when you listen to them really consciously with presence and don't get distracted. It's really what they are feeling. What I brought to you next as a human skill is communication. If you kind of, perhaps not mastered, but worked on your listening skills, it's the logical next step to communicate. How do you communicate? The other part, it's not only listening, it's also talking and interacting and your gestures and so on, and to communicate in a compassionate and in a connective way. And my suggestion is based on 9 non-violent communication, and that's just to as a kind of like a starter cutter, like a starter routine until you kind of get on a nearly master level. You're just starting with your observation, your feeling, your needs and requests, and perhaps you know that from giving effective feedback, because it's very important in this context, but also in other contexts. Observation, feelings, needs, and requests. And again, it sounds quite easy, but I would again invite you to do this reflection, intention, doing and adjusting cycle to improve your way forward. Second, the foundation, I just said that, the foundation for providing and receiving feedback effectively, and to transform a feedback conversation, which is perhaps most of the time, not so comfortable, into a really connecting conversation. And third, it builds psychological safety and trust in teams if you move towards more compassionate and connective communication. And this leads me to the third human skill that promotes organizational learning that I brought you, and it's asking great questions. Again, you may say, I've heard this before, and even what I show you, to ask open-ended questions, to go for what and how questions, and to avoid prompting and leading questions. You might have heard this before, but doing this also in stressful situation could be hard. So asking great questions is also obviously the foundation of effective coaching. And perhaps if you are moving towards a learning organization, you would also like to teach your people leaders to the basics of coaching, to set up peer-to-peer coaching teams so that the participants could really work with that and get better. They don't, perhaps in my experience, they don't need a very sophisticated coaching education. It's really not much more as these 3 basics, a little bit practicing and a little bit input on effective questions to think more broadly and to open the perspective. And then they can just start with practicing with peer-to-peer coaching while working on their day-to-day work, because they often have not the time to do some extra development trainings, but really working on their work. And by the way, you would build new connections. You would help people networking, perhaps across silos. And so I really recommend think about setting up this training for your leaders, for your people leaders, and set up cross-functional peer-to-peer coaching teams. So I have another question for you, and I would like to know which obstacles are preventing your organization or your team, just what you like to focus on, from becoming a learning organization. Please take 1 or 2 minutes, just give yourself some time, and I would be happy if you would type your answer into the chat, if you like.
And I'll read off some of those that come through. Firefighting,
Yeah.
Fear. Time, lack of enough workers, a culture of knowing versus learning. I see that a lot. Traditional management practices. Learning is not seen as a priority. It takes too much time. Production focus with industrial age management. Overburden, constant management changeover, turnover, I guess. Low investment in educators or coaches. Lack of prioritization, being under-resourced, not knowing what's in the value chain of the company, too busy, lack of buy-in to new initiatives, feel like we're so busy we're not even listening. Paradigms of the people who allocate the resources and lead do not believe in it, in that learning, I guess. Fear of failure, lack of patience, learning is not a strategic goal. There's not enough time designated for learning. Urgency of work to recover from COVID impact. Listening, not hearing. Upper management's not on board. Always focused on short-term goals. Learning only happens when we get trained. I can learn on my own. That's an interesting mindset that's out there. Misbelief that's not necessary. Lack of mentoring. And then the final one, we'll leave it here. There's no incentive for reflection.
Yeah.
That's an interesting.
Yes.
Idea.
Yes. And it's I would say, unfortunately, it's really very common what we hear here. And but when you think some people mentioned, and by the points of others, suggested that there's not a priority for upper management to move towards a learning organization. There are really, when you're thinking of the human skills, building the human skills, you could perfectly do that on your own. And you could do that, and also some of the leadership practices, or all of them, you could do in your team. You could just say, okay, if the senior management doesn't see that we would benefit from moving towards a learning organization, then we just do it in our team, or I just do it with some peers that all think the same way, like I am thinking. And you could many things you could just do on your own, with a kind of what I mentioned sometimes in this call, kind of adaptation of the PDSA or PDCA cycle, with this reflection, intention setting, doing, adjusting and reflecting and doing again. And if you have a team, or if you have some peers who are working with you, or who would want to develop in the same direction, just as one participant said, I can learn on my own. I don't need a training. Yes, exactly. You don't need a training. You could just work on your own with this very easy tools, or also in another way. But you could meet, if it's your daily huddle, and you say, okay, Fridays, we just share what was our focus this week, what was our intention, what did we learn, and how are we developing forward. Or you could, if it's people not in your team, you could meet for coffee or for lunch and just share your learning and where you're going. It would be much easier if senior management would be on board, but it doesn't mean that you couldn't move forward with your team or with friends and peers in the organization. So with that, I have one last question for you, and that is, what could be your one first or one next step towards a learning organization? And please, again, take 1-2 minutes. And again, I would be very happy if you would share your next step.
So I've got some things here. Awareness, sharing my own mistakes, Gemba walk, self-awareness. I love the idea of sharing mistakes. I share mistakes I make, and I encourage others to do that. We did a whole podcast about that, Sabrina. Sabrina was a guest on one of my podcasts, My Favorite Mistake. Leaders model investment in their development. Encouraging experimentation in my team to make it safe. Aim to create a sense of psychological safety with the people I work with. Learn to ask better questions to incite discussion and experiments. Leader training. Start with listening to understand, not to respond. Encouraging employees to learn. Learning to appreciate criticism, not defend against it. Shut down annual appraisals. Go and see approach. Get your fingernails dirty. Making sure learning is recognized. Use teaching moments to share learning experiences. So those are the comments.
Thank you very much. I really love that. I'm hoping very much that you don't forget what you just typed in and really go for it and really try to work on that. If you just follow your development cycle, your PDCA or PDSA cycle, you can't fail. In my experience, you always move forward. And please share with at least one colleague and ask them if they would like, or invite them to join you. That could be really a beginning of something bigger and something that's really helping your organization and yourself and help your development in your current organization. So I also added some further reading and free resources. There are much more. I just added something, and as Mark said, the slide deck will be sent to you all, so you could have a look for some books and also for a workshop that I really like very much, a team workshop that's provided by this information, and schedule is provided by Brené Brown. I did that sometimes, and it always has positive effect on building trust in teams. And I also added 2 links for other KaiNexus CI webinars on related topics. And with that, I want to thank you all. It was really a pleasure to talk with you, and thank you very much for all your engagement. Were so many great points, and I wish you all the best and very much success with working towards building a learning organization in your environment. And I would also love to connect with you all. And please, if you like to connect, give me a message on LinkedIn or send me an email or visit my website. Would be really happy to hear of all of you. And with that, I give the word back to you, Mark.
All right. Well, thank you, Sabrina. Thank you so much for what you shared today. And I encourage people to continue putting in questions. Sabrina's contact information, website, and email address will be on the slide that'll be up during the Q&A, and you'll be sent a link to the slides where you can connect on LinkedIn. So before we go into Q&A, and while more questions are coming in, we'll do a few announcements here about some other free resources that we'd like to invite you to check out. So first off, again, our session today is part of our KaiNexus Continuous Improvement webinar series. If this is your first time attending, we encourage you can go to kainexus.com/webinars and click on the right-hand side of the page. You can find our on-demand library, our whole history of webinars, including the webinars that Sabrina mentioned. They're all available there. They're always free. Our next webinar, we're going to have another presentation webinar in May, but we have something coming up on Thursday, a really unique opportunity. It'll be a panel discussion webinar, and it's titled A Path Forward, Reflections on Patient Safety, Just Culture, and the Nursing Profession After the Redonda Vaught Conviction. Redonda Vaught was a nurse who worked at a hospital in Tennessee, was involved in, she gave the wrong medication to a patient. That patient died, and then even worse, Redonda Vaught was prosecuted and recently convicted for what was arguably a systemic problem in that organization. So the panel, our esteemed panel of clinicians, includes Dr. Greg Jacobson, the CEO of KaiNexus, who is an emergency medicine physician, Kelly Reap, a clinical nurse specialist, Rebecca Love, who is a nurse and chief clinical officer for IntelliCare, and Brian Wyrick, who is the chief nursing officer at Banner Health in Arizona. So again, that's going to be Thursday at 1 o'clock. You can go and register for that today at kainexus.com/webinars. We hope you will join us. It's a serious topic, but there's clearly a lot of learning and to come from this and to think about what organizations can do moving forward. Other announcements, we have our podcast, or actually I think that if you go to the next slide, it is about our blog. You can go to blog.kainexus.com. There's content there many times a week. You can subscribe to get new blog posts sent to you. So we encourage you to check out if you click where it says improvement, that's our main blog. And then we have a customer blog that's more updates about our KaiNexus software. We also have our podcast series. We encourage you to find us in whatever podcast app you use, the KaiNexus Continuous Improvement podcast, or you can find links to all of that at kainexus.com/podcasts. The audio of today's session, again, will be made available in the podcast, and you can find the recording on our YouTube channel, or again, we will be emailing that to you tomorrow. So that is it for the announcements. There are a lot of thank yous in the chat, first of all. There's a gracias and a danke as well. So there, again, you can see Sabrina's email address and website address. So first off, Sabrina, there's a question here that says, how can leaders, if they're not trusted, how can they start building that trust back, or maybe building it to begin with?
Yeah, building it to begin with is easier than if the people have some experiences, and from these experiences they don't feel trust. Then it's harder, but that doesn't mean that it can't be done and you can't move towards building more trust. It's with conversation. It's with honest conversation. From my experience, is the most powerful, even if it's hard. The most powerful way to move forward. It's with sharing your thinking so that people don't misinterpret it, misinterpret what you are saying or how you are looking, because they think, oh, again, it seems like he doesn't like it, or she doesn't like it, or whatever. And so really share your thinking, share what you want to work on. That needs some vulnerability, but that helps to build trust. Share what you would like to work on. For example, if you would like to be a better listener, share your intention for the week and ask people to call you out because you will not always be perfect in with following your intention. That's totally natural. And yes, ask them to point you if you are falling back to old habits, for example. And you could also encourage them to do the same, to set an intention, another one, what they feel would be helpful for them. And perhaps with that, they are realizing that no one is really perfect, because we are often talking about leadership behaviors, and there are high expectations of leaders. And yes, it's quite reasonable. But on the other hand, it's totally unhealthy if people in an organization are expecting that their leaders are superhuman. That's even kind of just as bad as leaders thinking their people are not creative and can't think of great ideas. So everyone in the organization has to understand or to realize that we are all human, and that we share this struggling when we are trying to develop further, and no one is perfect. And for example, when you have a look at this building trust workshop that I shared, there's a kind of it breaks down to the autonomy of trust. What's the really the tangible aspects of trust, so that it's not so fluffy anymore. And one is really expect a positive intent, and that is so important. So perhaps you could do this workshop with your people. You could share your intention and invite them also to share their intention and develop in learning cycles. I think that would be very helpful.
I think just to make a comment, and I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on this. I mean, I think you alluded to the idea that let's say, if there has been trust, and it can take a long time to build trust. If something happens, something could happen that destroys trust very quickly. Yeah. Unfortunately, to where I think what you were saying was it can be more difficult to build it back once it's been lost. Yes. I'd just be curious to hear any of your thoughts or experiences on trying to avoid that situation where there's a big decrease in trust.
Yeah, trying to avoid this. I think everyone would try to avoid some situation where everyone else thinks negatively of them by nature, by impression management, for example. But that doesn't mean that it does not happen. Perhaps you're just not paying attention as you would like you would have paid in a moment, and you're just doing a mistake, and then there is this loss of trust. But you could use this situation for an open conversation. And it's really a hard conversation, but share why you did this mistake. Apologize, but you really apologize if you mean it. If not, people will immediately know that. Apologize if you mean it, and say what you will do in the next situation, and ask people to help you if they think it's going in a similar direction. Help you to make you aware, for example, really to share that, and not just to talk about it. It won't you won't get away from that. Perhaps you won't hear something because people are holding back. But please have this conversation, even if it's hard.
Yeah. There's another question here. Do you think the HR department should be the promoter of a cultural change like this? Can the HR department help promote the learning organization idea?
Yes, helping, yes, but it shouldn't be the leading force. Mm-hmm. The leading force in the ideal world should be the CEO, your CEO, the senior leadership team, should be in the end everyone in the organization on all levels. That doesn't mean that if people in the HR department are seeing that it would be really beneficial to move in this direction, that they shouldn't take initiative. I would recommend really to have a kind of workshop format, perhaps in this yearly offsite meeting with your leadership team, and really work with them, ask them to think about what would be really great, where they would like to strive, and then work with them to find out perhaps what are the obstacles, and so you would come to that. I really speak from experience with the strategy workshops. We always come to, when we look deeper and go a step deeper, we always come to this people topics. Not only, but they are also part of the whole story. Mm-hmm. So I would really encourage to get the buy-in from your leadership team.
Yeah. There's another question here. If you can go back and maybe repeat or elaborate on some of this, Sabrina. This question says, you mentioned a cycle that started with reflection and then some other steps.
Yes.
What was that? If you want to talk to it, or I don't know if you want to go back. To that.
this inspired from the PDCA or PDSA cycle that you know from lean management or from continuous improvement. And the suggestion is to really start with the study from the PDSA, and so to do a reflection and think about what are your current habits and what are the results of your current habits. And then to set an intention. Perhaps, for example, it's listening, and you see, oh, yes, sometimes when I really reflect honestly, I'm not listening as long as perhaps would be beneficial because I'm so passionate and I want to move forward and I have this feeling of urgency or whatsoever. So you do this reflection and then you set an intention. What kind of behavior would be aligned with how you would like to be, how you would like to show up. And so you set your broader intention, for example, listening really without thinking of the next step and without, really speeding up because you're feeling a sense of urgency, really taking your time, perhaps counting to 10 or whatever. And that's in the planning phase. You really have something very concrete. You say, okay, in my daily huddle, for example, when someone is voicing an idea, and so I won't interrupt them, even if I have this urgency to do so, and I will just count to 10 before that, and perhaps counting to 10, yes, but really listening at the time, and let someone really share their idea. And in the evening, or at the end of the week, there's the next step, the third step, or the fourth step. You have this reflection, intention, the concrete planning, and then you do that. And then you go back into the circle, you check and adjust. You say, okay, I did that. I tried, or at least I tried to listen really with intention. I tried to speak to 10. Did I do that? Yes or no? Or did I perhaps only count to 5? Or forgot about it when it was really a topic which was really where I was really passionate about, and then you would try to adjust, or you said, okay, yes, I did it, I counted to 10, but it was not the outcome that I wished. So you think about what could you adjust, and so you go again. You set your intention, do your plan. And then the next day, you have a next learning cycle. That's the idea.
There's a couple questions here from Jesus. I'm going to take different pieces from a couple of these questions here. So first off, he says, the ideas presented here as explained by you are quite easy to understand, yet it's really hard to create a learning habit in a company. What training do you recommend we could give senior management? But then in another question, he says, I think this is worth connecting. We can present the facts and science of a more progressive management practices, and managers maybe get excited about it, but only for a week, and then they forget about it.
Yeah, really, consistency is a huge enabler to move forward. And it's totally normal to perhaps only get excited for some time, and then your routines, your normal patterns are kicking in, and you're feeling, because you have no time, you're engaged in firefighting, all these topics that we just heard when you answered the last question. So it gets lost, and so you really have to help to set up something like, for example, when I set up this coaching capability program in my former company, I started with the leadership team with a short training, and then they had 6 weeks to practice weekly. And after the 6 weeks, they knew in advance that there would be a review, and it would be a review, and where another senior manager would visit them, and they really would have to present some learnings, to give them a little incentive really to get started and to keep doing that for at least these 6 weeks. And I also sent them reminders and how to impulses, how to how to overcome obstacles every week. And so, it was not perfectly successful, but it was much more successful if I haven't did that. And they really got into the habit to practice that. So I would recommend something like a really short coaching capability building program with what we learned with listening and on asking powerful questions, and then setting up peer-to-peer coaching teams or teams of 3 people perhaps, so that if someone is missing, it still takes place. I would also recommend to help people or set up with if you have daily or weekly meetings with the team, to set up some time where everyone shares their intention for the week and move together with their PDSA cycles, reflection, intention, doing, and then checking, adjusting, and really to share that. Set your intention shortly at the beginning of the week, for example, and share your learnings at the end of the week.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Sabrina. I think we have time for to hear your thoughts on another part of the question that Jesus asked. He says, one of the main obstacles to building a learning culture is the quote unquote traditional management view, where leaders are doers and fixers. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts on how we can try to help them or convince them to shift toward a more progressive view of leadership where learning is prioritized? Or what I would add is, instead of being the doer and the fixer, being a servant leader or a facilitator or a coach.
Yes. From my experience, someone was a very traditional leader and was very hesitant to jump to that ideas, was really to offer it in this way that I said, you have the choice how to move forward and what performance your team could develop, and it's you that in every situation take some short kind of clarity pause or intention pause and think, what's important now that we as a team have the best performance? Is it really that I'm in firefighting, or at least being the decider role and really just doing my normal kind of leadership? Or is it more important to move towards people development, so that everyone can develop and thus the team gets better and gets higher performance? So really, it's your intention, you have the power and you have the responsibility to move towards even higher performance in your team, and that's the way. At least that worked in my experience. Mm-hmm. Or suggest that.
Yeah. And then we had something added here. It's really more of a comment, but I'll read it and maybe get a quick reaction from you, Sabrina, and then we'll wrap up. Mm-hmm. It says here, a published statistics report that 61% of the quote unquote legacy management people will age out or retire by the year 2031. If a company is not building a kind of a different style of leadership, if they're not educating the new younger workforce, then the company is destined to relearn these lessons again and again over time. Company leadership should be creating leadership training teams for the future.
Yes, definitely.
I guess to make sure we don't just have the younger people learning the old way of managing. So I'll leave it to you for a final thought on that.
Sabrina. Yeah, I totally agree that we should really deliberately do that. And don't always, when we talk about leadership, and I also did that in my presentation as well, I said, as your people leaders, invite them to the coaching training, but really to think of everyone in the organization to be leading in their sphere, and so that invite everyone to develop and expect these leadership practices from everyone. So that would also help, not only developing, but also help to understanding that it's not so easy, and that you really would have to be superhuman to do it perfectly. But that would be my idea, just to move forward.
Yeah. Well, Sabrina, thank you so much for the presentation today. Thank you for sharing your thoughts and frameworks and ideas that people can go and check out. I think in particular, the Amy Edmondson material and her research in the book, I really would second the suggestion to go and check that out. It's such an important topic. So there are more thank yous coming in through the chat. Great job here, Sabrina. Thank you again for doing the
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mark, for having me today. It was such a pleasure and such a great experience. And thank you very much to all of you who participated for all your comments, for your wonderful questions. It was a pleasure to work with you during this hour. Thank you very much. Yeah. Have a great day and have a great week, everyone.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone, for attending.